All right, hello, welcome everybody. Welcome to Talkin Investing. I'm Tom. George is out sick again today. I do see him. Hello, George. I see him. Oh, he's saying, all right. We have a immediate update. George is saying he can get in. Let me send him an invite right now. George, I'm sending you an invite right now. Sorry, everybody. Just give me 1 second, and I will take care of this. So, hello. Hope everybody had a good day. Hope everybody had a good week. I know we'll get into it. The Bitcoin miners were very disappointing for the second half of the day today. Give me just a second, everybody. Okay, I just sent George an invite. He should get that in a minute, so it sounds like he will be able to join us. He was not feeling well. He called, said he wasn't up for it, but he must be rallying, unlike the Bitcoin mining stock. So I'm gonna go to the split screen here in anticipation of George's arrival. All right, hello, George. We are live.
Right.
Welcome.
Hey, I'm here, but I still can't start my freaking video.
You cannot. All right. Well, we're gonna have you in
Hopefully
voice only.
Hopefully I can figure that out. But I'm here. Go on.
If not, you can be the cow. So
I had to come in when I saw freaking with Iris. Wow.
Well, we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk about Iris Energy. We're going to talk about Bitfarms. We're going to talk about several of the other Bitcoin miners. We'll definitely talk about what happened to Bitcoin today. We'll talk about what happened to the Bitcoin miners, really from the middle of the day to the end of the day. It was not pretty, so we'll get to all that. If I could first just ask everybody to please smash the like button. We have 19 likes. Let's see if we can get this stream out to everybody. So do us a big favor if you enjoy this content. If you want to help the live stream in real time, please smash the like button. How you feeling, George?
Good. I'm good. Oh,
good.
Oh, my webcam's not even plugged in. That's my problem.
Ah, all right.
That could be the problem.
That's the simplest of all solutions. All right. Well, while George is plugging in, we'll get to... So, Iris, where do you guys want to start? I mean, we can start with what Iris really had the big news of the week, and there was a very strange reaction to it after hours the day it was announced. I put a comment in our members only Discord, and and then the next day it did what I thought was more reasonable. It's been rallying all week long. Some of these Bitcoin miners had a better week than you think. It's just that today was very disappointing. So I also do have a chart of the Bitcoin miners, what they did on the week versus what Bitcoin did on the week this week. And there was some of them that were disappointing. It wasn't a disaster, but it really, this afternoon, erased what should have been a pretty good week. Still, almost every single Bitcoin miner was green this week, but it should have been much better than this. And I'm going to go to, let me find... This was, if you guys can see this was Wednesday. So, I copied, I made a copy of the big board on Wednesday because we had a giant green day on Wednesday. I mean, Marathon up almost 12%, Riot up 6%, Cleanspark 11.5%, Bitfarms was up 15%, Cypher 12%. Those were the big winners, but everything else, well, Hut was up 13%, Hive 8%. I mean, you can look across the board. I know this was a couple of days ago, but I'm starting here because I just want to remind people, like, today stunk, if I can... I'd like to use a more harsh word than that. This afternoon, from around 11:30 Eastern time until the end of the day, the Bitcoin miners just went down in a straight line. This was a Friday sell-off. It was nothing other than that, and it's just extremely disappointing. And I get it. So I'm sure a lot of you probably are not feeling that great over, what happened the last 4 hours. But I wanted to show you guys this because we get these days. Like, this was just 2 days ago. This is not the last day the Bitcoin miners are ever going to have that looks like this. And I'm not trying to spread hopium. And we show you guys all the real numbers, and we'll go through and show exactly what happened. But I do think it's important to remember, like, this is not an anomaly, right? This is how the Bitcoin miners trade. It's one day through the roof, the next day, a giant disappointment. But over time, in previous cycles, all's well that ends well. Now, we're nowhere near that yet. This has been a brutal year to date. So we'll look at year to date as well. So the Bitcoin miners have not done well year to date, but Bitcoin has had a breakout. So we're going to talk about that too. I got some very simple technical analysis that tells me we have had the first just extremely clear breakout in it's been 2.5 months, and every way I looked at this. So we'll go through that too. We got 30 likes. Do us a favor, if you guys don't mind, if you could smash the like button. It does help the live stream out in real time, so we appreciate it. Okay, so let's go back to the regular chart. I wanted to start out by showing this because most of the rest of what we're going to talk about is how disappointing this afternoon was. But I do want to talk Iris and Bitfarms. Bitfarms started the week off on a bad note and rallied huge, so we'll get to that too. In fact, on our Tuesday members only live stream, I was discussing the fact that all of a sudden back in the comments section on the videos was talk that, Bitcoin or Bitfarms is going under $1. They're going to need to do a reverse stock split. It's the end of the world. And, it's not the end of the world. You can see, we'll go back to.
Hey, thanks, Darren S. My Valley finally took off my options.
Oh, nice.
I mean, it pumped. I'm up 677%.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Nice. That's a big win. So Bitfarms had a big rally this week. An awful day on Monday. You saw a big day on Wednesday, and it ended up in the green this week. But Bitcoin itself. So as always, there's a gold line. This is where Bitcoin was when the U.S. equity markets closed yesterday. So end of the equity markets on Thursday. So from Thursday to the end of today, I think this was the closing. This is the 15-minute candles. So this is where Bitcoin was when the equity markets closed today. So Bitcoin was up 3% day over day. And if I move this up a little bit, you'll see. So I've got IBIT on here, which is the BlackRock ETF. So you'll see. That was up 3.04%, so that's basically in line with what happened. That's how that's supposed to work. So on a day where Bitcoin was up 3%, all of a sudden, by the end of the day, the green all of a sudden turned into an outlier. Every single one, at 10:30 this morning Eastern time, so an hour after the market opened, every single one of these was green, and a lot of these were up. I mean, Cleanspark was up 7 or 8%. It finished down 2.7%. That's a giant swing. And, I'll look at the Cleanspark. Well, let's look at this real quick. I'll switch to Cleanspark. If I go to, so I got a yellow line on here for where some of these ended. So this was last Friday. So you'll see, even after a disappointing day and what felt like a disappointing week, Cleanspark was still up on the week. This is last Friday. This is this Friday. But, from the top to the bottom, from the top to the close, this was an 8.4% move to the downside. And if I go to the 1 hour, you'll see, we opened right here. So, we flashed down a little bit, and then we were off to the races. And then suddenly everything peaked, and it just, the rest of the hours, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way into the close, just all bad. So this is what most of these charts looked like. Now, some still ended up in the green. Right? Iris Energy continued its rally. HUT has actually had a phenomenal week. So I will be doing a deep dive on HUT for the members only. They did finally put their earnings out. So, I will still say I may have more questions than answers, but we got a lot of information, and the market received that earnings report very well. So I'm not going to dig too deep into that, but I want to go take just a quick look at that right now. So you'll see revenue of $51 million, and their revenue is split. They've got other sources of revenue beyond their Bitcoin mining now. So that's not, I think 30 million of that was Bitcoin mining. And then net income was $250.9 million. So a lot of these companies this quarter. So we just got quarterly earnings. Last week, we got the last 5 major Bitcoin miners to do their quarterly earnings report. These were really, really good quarterly earnings reports, but, it's a very tricky situation because this was the quarter prior to the halving. So Bitcoin rallied huge. So the companies like Hut 8 that have a big stack, they have the second biggest hodl position of all the Bitcoin miners. So as a result, they now get to market, and that is a big move to the upside. So they have a huge net income in the quarter. But I'm not going to dismiss that. They have 9,000 Bitcoin. So, a lot of people will say, well, this isn't real. It's just the change in Bitcoin. But, that unless you guys think Bitcoin's done and peaked, it's really, I think you can expect a lot more from here. So I count these as real, and I understand it's not from day-to-day operations, and I do think that's an important distinction. So we have to look at those two things. But the third thing we have to look at is everybody's cost equation is going to change, right? The reward gets cut in half. So, there's going to be a lot of, between the first quarter and the second quarter earnings results, there's going to be a lot of new information. And I'm not as optimistic about Hut 8's second quarter. I guess I'll just give you that much, and I'll leave the rest for the deep dive. What do we got, George? I see a poll that went up. Is there one that you didn't finish?
Yeah, I ended one about where's everybody shocked with what Iris did.
Oh,
and then the next one was about Bitcoin and the next moves.
So 63% were not shocked. So let's talk. I think, George, you're on here specifically to talk Iris, among other things. And I think that was the biggest news of the week. Iris and Bitfarms had the big announcements this week. So let's talk about Iris Energy.
Iris Energy. What a great
I guess they don't want to be called Iris Energy anymore. But I think that's still technically their name, right? But Iris Energy Limited, but they are now going by IREN. Anyway, that's not the important part of this. On May 15th, IREN's expansion plans increased to 30 exahash in 2024. So they're just approaching, they were going to plan to be to 10 exahash by June 30th and 20 exahash by December 31st, 2024. So those were big, big increases. Iris Energy, when we go month over, Iris Energy was the only Bitcoin miner of the top, 15 Bitcoin miners in the month of April. They mined more than they did in the month of March. So all the other Bitcoin miners mined anywhere from a little bit less to a lot less, and most of that is due to, 2 parts. Number 1, increase in the difficulty level. Number 2, for a third of the month, the halving happened. And, so the reward was less. But yet still with that, Iris added enough exahash where they mined more Bitcoin in April than they did in March. So they had a very good month. But 20 exahash was the extent of their, plans at that point. So now, this is a massive, massive increase. And so they go beyond this. So they're saying now 30 exahash by the end of 2024. So instead of them being I considered Iris Energy and Bitfarms very similar companies in that, Iris Energy was targeting 20 exahash by the end of the year. Bitfarms is targeting 21 exahash by the end of the year. While Iris just jumped to 30. Beyond that, they have this sentence right here. Additional Bitmain S21 Pro miner purchase options for 10 additional exahash, supporting an expansion pathway to 40 exahash in the first half of 2025. Now, all of a sudden, that puts them in the conversation, right? We've got Marathon, Marathon, CleanSpark, and Riot that, are at exahash levels and exahash targets that are just, those three have separated themselves from the group. But all of a sudden, if Iris Energy is going to go from 10 exahash to 40 exahash, essentially in the next 12 to 13 months, they're going to be in that conversation. The flip side of that is that these are bold statements. So, that there's a lot of things that need to be done to get from 10 to 30 by the end of this year, never mind 40. So, all these Bitcoin mining companies are in they're in this situation where I think they got to prove that they're going to do this. These are big, bold statements. I was shocked when they said they're going to get to 30 by the end of the year and 40, in the first half of 2025. Also, they talk about their power under management, and they have said they're much, much more efficient in the amount of exahash they can get out of, per megawatt. So somewhere I'm looking for, they say the total amount of megawatts they're going to have under management, and it, something like, I'm just going to say the wrong number, but something like 500 megawatts. Oh, here we go. Global data center capacity now planned to be 510 megawatts by the end of 2024. So if they're going to get 30 exahash out of 510 megawatts and then 40 exahash, I mean, that's better than, most of their peers are doing by far. So that's not the big part, I think. Right? So the flip side of this, and again, I just feel like we should expect this. How are you going to get from 10 exahash to 40 exahash? Money. Right? So lots and lots of money. Lots of money. So that leads to this. Iris Energy, this is a $500 million at the market shelf offering. So remember, they did a $500 million offering. They're not done with their last $500 million offering. I think they still have maybe $100 million or $120 million left on that one. And now they're proposing another $500 million. But this makes sense to me. In fact, if they can get all of it, if they can get to 40 exahash for, the two 500s together is $1 billion. If that can get them to, they were at 4 or 5 exahash when they announced that originally. They're already approaching 10. If they can get to 40, I know that this is more dilution and this makes people crazy, but like I thought this was a monster buying opportunity on the dip. I made a note in the Discord that, they've had a huge monster announcement and the stock's tanking is basically what I said. So, everybody's got to decide whether or not they want to be, in Iris at all. But in my opinion, not financial advice. I always have to tell everybody none of this is financial advice. These are our opinions and our thoughts, and we try and share information. But
look at that consensus of the Bitcoin. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Where Bitcoin's going next.
Let's take a look.
69K plus 43%.
Ooh, so overwhelmingly to the upside from here. 12% think it's going down. Right? And then 12% think it's going to 60 to 65 or lower. So that would be a move to the downside. 65 to 67, 10%. And then 78% think it's going up. And 69,000 plus is the biggest group. So I would agree. I would say 69,000 plus, and I think it's going to be quick. I'm going to give it a 2-week period, but really, in my mind, I don't think it's going to take 2 weeks to get, to retest at least 71 is my target, with a real chance of retesting 74, in my opinion. So that would be my vote. What do you think, George?
I don't know. I'm not a very good judge of anything right now. I know Bitcoin's going up. I just don't know when it's doing it.
Well, and this is the super hardest part about all this. I know we've all been fooled many times. I consider today a day I got fooled because, and it's shame on me because here's what's been happening. If you guys, and I know that most of you are following along with the Bitcoin miners, they tend to run up first thing in the morning. If you were a day trader and, you were in the morning and, got out early and then, let it, I won't say crash, but, big moves to the downside and then, rinse and repeat. That's what's been happening with the Bitcoin miners more often than not. It's not every single day, and especially prone to that with Friday sell-off type things. So today, in the middle of the day, it looked like, okay, we turned the corner. The Bitcoin rally is clearly on. The miners are participating. All is good. All is right in the world. And then things started to change. And you can see, this is a very red board. Cleanspark to 100, thank you for the super chat. Cleanspark to 100 said, Tom, when Iron did their 500 at the market back in September, you and I hated it and didn't go down with their dilution path. What's different between then and now? Okay, so that's a great question because you're right, Cleanspark to 100. I actually sold my Iris Energy. I very rarely sell any of this stuff, so that was unusual. I waited a while and I bought back in. Now, it did have a huge dip after that, but to be fair, everything had a huge dip. So I'm not sure how much the at-the-market offering, I may have just gotten lucky on that. What's different this time, for me, in my opinion, is I've seen a lot of execution out of them. So, I thought it would take them a long time. All right. People roll out these plans and they say, we're going to get from here to there. And for the most part, with a couple of exceptions, really, Cleansparks is the one that has really, and they have not been perfectly on target, but, their growth has been, just absolutely consistent and relentless. Well, Iris Energy now, in my opinion, is the second best. I think, as for percentage growth, they may have even grown as a percentage even more than CleanSpark did in the last 12 months. CleanSpark grew more, in raw numbers. CleanSpark went from 10 to 17 in really 90 days. 10 exahash to 17 exahash. But now I see Iris Energy getting to their benchmarks ahead of schedule. So they got to 9 exahash ahead of schedule. They're going to get to 10 exahash ahead of schedule. They did so they didn't even spend the first $500 million. And they've locked down a lot of these machines. So, it's a fair question, Cleanspark to 100. I still understand, some people may say, you know what, I'm going to step out of the way for now and see if there's a big pullback. But I just feel like with a little bit more, actually much more of a proven track record now as far as their growth plans go. Also, operationally speaking, the amount of Bitcoin they're mining per exahash, their operational performance has been very consistently excellent. So, and with this plan to get to 30 or 40 exahash, they've separated themselves into, I think they've jumped up a whole group. So I think there's a top 8 Bitcoin miners, but even inside of those top 8, and then 4 after that. So from 9 to 12, I think is its own group. I think there's a top 8, and I think there's now 3 groups forming inside of that. Iris Energy, I thought, was in that middle group. And now, to me, it looks like maybe they certainly with their plans are attempting to jump into that top tier group. There was no Iris Energy, but prior to this press release, there was nobody, they weren't even talking about being, one of the top 3 largest Bitcoin miners. But with their efficiency, if they do what they say they're going to do, my guess is they're going to be mining somewhere between more and a lot more Bitcoin than Riot a year from now, if they stick to these plans. And that is always a gigantic if. These are huge plans that they're rolling out. So, I guess to an extent, I'll see it when I believe it. Crypto Fever said, Cleanspark to 100, they have a clear path to 40 exahash. So, that's what I'm now seeing. And, when they first announced this, they were a $200 million company putting out a $500 million at the market offering. They hadn't really proven anything yet. The other thing they did is switch to, they are now putting out quarterly reports. So they just put out a quarterly report. We weren't getting those. They weren't required. They're not required for them, but they're doing it. So they're doing all these things, in my opinion, to, I think, really try to prove to the investment community that they're going to do what they say they're going to do. Now, they got a long way to go. And I also see Crypto Fever saying, I bought that dip at $4.57. So, right. So, congratulations, Crypto Fever. I mean, that was, what, 2 days ago? And Iris Energy is now at over $6. So, go ahead, George.
Listen to this one. Iris will pass Riot to be number 2. Ty says that. That's crazy.
I mean, if they do what they say they're going to do, unless Riot can prove otherwise, Riot's another one where I'm full disclosure, I'm invested in Riot, not financial advice. Please, you guys do your own due diligence, and you can see, like, days like today are the reason that I always pound the table that you cannot borrow somebody else's conviction. I don't care what YouTuber you're watching or investment guru that you're listening to, that believes through and through, unless you've done your own, whatever amount of due diligence necessary to get you comfortable with this, days like today will drive you out of stocks. Right? If you owned, there's a reason that Cleanspark went from up big to, in the red. A lot of people sold their Cleanspark today. And unfortunately, probably a lot of it was, and it's not just Cleanspark, right? Bitfarms ended up in the red. Marathon ended up in the red. Cypher was down 5% for a different reason. TerraWolf is struggling. They had the worst week out of everybody by far. So I'll show that chart next. But yeah, I mean, if they do what they say they're going to do, I think we should do a poll and see who's whether people think who's going to mine more Bitcoin in 2025, Riot or Iris Energy?
We're going to 2025?
Okay, go to 2024. Yeah, absolutely. Go to 2024. Cleanspark to 100 said, Iris is following Cleanspark's dilution path to growth. And I agree with that, but look, if they execute, here's what Cleanspark proved. If you execute, you will be rewarded, because Cleanspark is the runaway, no contest, best performing stock out of all the Bitcoin mining companies. So, everybody can have their own opinion on which one's the best company and, all that other stuff. But just strictly speaking from a stock performance standpoint, it's not even close. They're the only company in the green.
Who's going to buy? I mean, more. It says come, but more is what it meant. Sorry. They know what.
Who's going to mine more Bitcoin in 2024? Riot or Iris? Ooh.
I think it's one of those, you got to do it straight up, because if you add too many people, you know what's going to happen.
Yeah, no, I think we got to do Riot versus Iris, and then I would like to see if we switch that. So maybe next, let's give everybody a while to vote here, and then switch that to 2025, and see if that changes people's mind or not.
Have they been putting more batches out, Tom? Have they been sending press releases about that?
Riot has installed some more batches. I can only assume that that's true. I have not seen any press releases to that. I hold Riot, and, I'm waiting. I understand they built out their, having built out their own infrastructure from dirt, it's taking them a while to get their exahash online. And I'm not going to have blind faith forever. If I don't see, for me, if somewhere in the next 90 to 120 days, if there's not significant improvement in exahash for Riot, I may change my mind on Riot. And it's one of my big positions. So this is what we always talk about, right? Have a plan, but George harps on the fact that, this is a fluid situation, and if things change, that should be a part of your plan, and your plan needs to be flexible. I've stayed with Riot for years now, but they're at the point now. They've said They have 400 megawatts at their new facility. They've ordered the machines. They've paid for the machines. I think they said all the machines are, not all the machines, but significant number of machines are delivered. So I just don't see what's stopping them from getting exahash online. They've said they're at 12.6 exahash when last reported April 30th. They're still talking about getting to 31 or 32 by the end of the year this year. So if they're going to get from, 12 to 30 plus, they better start getting machines plugged in. All right, welcome to Talkin Investing.
Oh, brother, Barry.
Barry, thank you for being a member, Barry, for 20 months. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Barry said, I hear Texas is having electric problems due to storms. Any update to any miners affected? So I haven't seen any miners putting out any press releases regarding that. So I don't know if anybody's been watching to see if it's affected, right? We can look at, the one thing we can look at directly is, in addition to some of these wallets, Marathon has their own pool. So I guess we could look and see what's going on there. And they still have the majority of what Marathon does is in Texas. Manny, who is a member, thanks for being a member, said Riot is undervalued. So Manny, I think that, again, for me, I hold Riot. I think if they do what they said they're going to do and finish their plans, then they're undervalued. But to the legions of investors who are waiting to see it, to believe it, I understand, because, they finally, they've been at 12.4 exahash for what feels like forever. And, then they finally increase that, and they increase it to 12.6 exahash. That's not what we're looking for, right? We've got companies like Cleanspark going from 10 exahash to 17 exahash in a few months. And we've got companies, if you look at Iris Energy, their growth path, it has been massive in 2024. And now they just announced it's going to be significantly more than they were previously even talking about. And they're not alone. TeraWulf's added a bunch. Cypher is planning to. A lot. 8 of these companies have pretty decent growth plans. There's 4 companies that I'm a little bit on the fence about their growth plans. And to me, the leader of those 4, and I'm forgetting one in my head here. Well, I can just look at the list. So BitDeer, to me, BitDeer, Hut 8, Hive, and BitDigital, to me, they're right after the top 8. Those 4, I'm more up in the air on. So again, this is just my personal opinion, but just, so that you guys know, that's that 4th group that I think some of those in that group may put a business model together and be a big winner. Some of those may go sideways, and some of them may go south. There's a group below that of 6 or 7 that I think are, let's just say they need help. They're in trouble. If you listen to the CEO of Marathon and Cleanspark, both of those CEOs think several of these Bitcoin miners aren't going to make it to the end of the year. And we know that Stronghold has already basically put themselves up for sale. They were down 7.5% today. And I feel like I want to look at that chart, because I feel like that happened very late in the day. There must have been a big drop. Let's just take a quick look at that. If we go,
I'm reading that Matt Schultz's son died yesterday.
Oh, that's tragedy.
Yeah.
Well, thoughts go out to Matt. That's awful. So you can see Stronghold did this, they peaked again in the morning in this 11:30 Eastern Time candle. And then to the end of the day, they were down 12%. And a lot of that was in this last 1 hour candle. This was a big move to the downside at the end of the day here for them. And it's down below. I mean, if you look, it was kind of a line somewhere, in this area that they had touched a couple of times that they broke through to the downside. So it's not, you do not want to be crossing lines to the downside. And it looks like that's what Stronghold did today. That's awful to hear about, Matt. Did they put a press release out, or did they say
No,
something
it's
on Twitter?
on. He follows me on Twitter. We follow. Yeah, that's just rough.
Yeah, that's terrible.
He doesn't even look. He looks maybe 26, maybe 24 to 26.
There's no
All right.
words. I can't even.
No words. I mean, it's just I can't even imagine. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Scott Richardson, thanks for being a member, by the way. And thanks for the super chat. Scott said, pump in the AM was the crash of GameStop and AMC. So, yeah, let me just bring this up. For those, here's the problem with these. This is why I stay away from these. So here's GameStop for the week. You know, next thing you knew, GameStop, you know, at the beginning of this week, they were, you know, a $20 stock. All of a sudden, you know, on Tuesday, they're a $78 stock. So, but here's the problem. This is how the rich get richer, right? They took this ride up, but that was the peak. This is Tuesday AM. By the end of the week, they were down to $22. They were back where they started. So, how much, you know, how many of you think that most likely big money made money from 22 to 78 and then made money the other way back down from 78 back down to 22, right? They made money and then they took everybody's money. So the retail traders' money. This is my fear with these GameStop, AMC, and, you know, congratulations if any of you out there timed this right. You know, some people make big money on this. I'm just afraid that, you know, for every person that does well on this, there's 5 or 10 that get wrecked. And so I just, to me, this is just random guessing. And I watched a lot of big YouTubers' videos, and they were all saying, buy, you got to buy the dip. You know, we're only in day 2 of this. You know, these tend to last X number of days. Well, there is no these. This is like just random nonsense trading. I'm sorry. I guess that's my opinion, but I think it would be supported by the underlying data.
And who knew that it was going to end at 78? You know what I mean?
Right.
Why not 58? Why not 48?
Why not 150? You know what I mean? Why not
Right.
500 like it did last time?
Right. And who says this is over with, too?
Right. They could ride this back up and down and up and down. I just, for me, I'll be on the wrong side.
I want to
of
know
this.
how much money people lost in that. I mean, that's, you know what I mean?
I just, you know, I could just tell you, if it's anything like what normally happens, as you guys know, it's the retail investors who FOMO'd in here and, you know, unfortunately, many of which got destroyed. So that's true. You know, GameStop, and it was all week, really, from here, the rest of the week. These things just were down, down, down. The market was very sideways, as you can see. By the way, very sideways at its all-time high. We are now at all-time highs in the S&P 500, in the NASDAQ, in the Dow. Not in the Russell. Not even close in the Russell. Let me go to... So if I go to the SPY, so this is the S&P, you know, this is an ETF that trades the S&P 500. You'll see our previous all-time high was in March of 2024. And then if you go back, you know, we hit a new all-time high in January of 2022. And then we know, you know, things, it wasn't just Bitcoin that had a winter. The market was down. Well, it roared back, hit a new all-time high in March, and now we've taken that out. So here's the S&P 500 at a new all-time high. If we look at the Qs, which is the NASDAQ, you know, so here's the NASDAQ on Wednesday taking out and making a new all-time high. The Dow hit, well, actually it closed today over 40,000. I mean, Dow 40,000. I don't really pay that much attention to the Dow, but, you know, that number grabs my attention.
That's amazing when you stop to think about it.
it blows my mind because I will always remember, and this wasn't that long ago. I mean, it was a while ago, but it wasn't that long ago. It's not like it was in the 80s. Somewhere, in the 2000s, I had read there was an article, Dow to hit 20,000. And I just remember, and this is how wrong I was. I just remember thinking, like, that is so ridiculous. The Dow was at like 6,000 at that time. And I'm thinking to myself, hey, who's talking about Dow 20,000? Well, now here we are today at Dow 40,000. So, if I had done nothing and just, bought an index that followed the Dow from that day to this day, I'd probably be ahead of where I am right now.
Do you see any major pullbacks coming in the stock market anytime soon, Tom?
I mean, could we get 5% correction type of thing? Maybe. I think we keep going up. The one thing is, and we've seen some of this happen this year, if global events take a turn for the worse, I mean, look what just happened from March. We had that, and a lot of that was, all of that was geopolitical, inflation concerns. So, could we get a bad CPI report and, we get something goes the wrong way in one of these conflicts that's going on in the world, and maybe all of a sudden, we get another one of these deals. So I don't know. So could we have pullbacks? But I think the bias is to the upside, really, in the U.S. between now and the election. And that's it's not that far away. I was going to say it's a long ways away, but it's not. I mean, we're in the middle of May, and that's at the beginning of November. So if we look at, I'm just going to go to the Russell 2000. So if you look at a 5-year on the Russell, you'll see back in November of 2021. So this is when Bitcoin hit its all-time high. This is when everything was off to the races. The Russell 2000 was I don't think it got to, but it was over 2,400, around 2,450. Well, we're way off of that. So we're nowhere near our all-time high on the Russell. So that continues to lag. I think the Russell's going to catch up. Absolutely not financial advice. This is a triple leverage play, but
yeah, I mean, crypto, I still think there could be a war. I mean, maybe I'm wrong.
Well,
I don't want a war.
We got
Last
two
thing I want
conflicts
is a
out
war.
there. Right. I
Right.
mean, so this is triple long the Russell. So this is a leveraged ETF, so not financial advice, and please trade with care. But I think the Russell, all the other indexes are at their all-time high. The Russell, and it's the same. The Russell's waiting for the same thing that the Bitcoin miners are waiting for, and that is, some quantitative easing, some lowering of interest rates, some movement back to some of these risk on assets. And we just haven't seen that at all. And it's been holding out for years now. So, we'll see. That's what I'm expecting. But I expected we'd already be in the middle of that. And it really hasn't. We're not. We're not at all yet.
Crypto fever, I don't disagree with you. I thought we'd see a 5% correction. I thought we'd see a huge correction. But you know what? You can never predict a black swan.
Well, you can't predict a black swan, and I don't think you can trade on
No.
Thinking there's a black swan event coming, because those happen when they happen. And not before and not after. So the other company, just switch gears while we're at it. If you're just joined us, or if you have not yet, if you please smash the like button. It does help the live stream out in real time in a big way. So it would be much appreciated. Let's take a look first before I go to Bitfarms. Let's take a look at what these companies did, what the Bitcoin miners did this week, because there was some good news, some not so good news, and one company that did not do well at all. So this is from last Friday until today, this Friday, the close today. So you're going to see Bitcoin had a big week. Bitcoin, as always, is in gold here, up 11% week over week. There were Bitcoin miners that outperformed Bitcoin. Marathon, which is the largest Bitcoin miner, outperformed Bitcoin this week, up 13%. Now, that's certainly not a 2 or 3x leverage type of a move to the upside, but it did outperform. Iris Energy had the monster week. So after, Crypto Fever, who got in at $4.57, this thing ran after that. So the market, once it digested this, really liked that press release in a big way. We'll see what happens over time. And, with all these, they're going to have to continue to show us that they're executing their plan. But so far, they have been showing us that they're executing their plan. I'm waiting. Bitfarms is in a big time show me type of a situation, because they're talking about adding a significant amount of exahash between now and June 30th. So, the clock's running out. They got less than 45 days left to get to the 12 exahash goal they had for, the end of this quarter. And, as of April 30th, they were, I think, at 7.5 exahash. So we'll see. But that's the thing. If Bitfarms over the next, if the next 2 monthly reports are that Bitfarms went from 7.5 to 9 to 12 exahash, I think that's going to bode well for the stock. But in the meantime, Bitfarms was up 1% this week versus Bitcoin, which was up 11. And you're going to see a giant grouping, plus or minus 0, from minus 1% to up 5%. That was the majority of the Bitcoin miners this week. So that's underperforming Bitcoin. Having said that, it's not a nightmare, right? A bunch of these outperformed, a bunch of these underperformed, but they were still in the green. GREE, I have nothing left to say on GREE. For me, I just don't know what their path is to victory. They're down over 99% from their highs. But, having said that, if you're a day trader or a swing trader, I don't know. Maybe there's money to be made there. Who knows? But please invest very carefully, as always. Stronghold, pulled back 4% this week. But they had a big boost when they announced they were considering, basically putting themselves up for sale. So they had some pullback. They lost a little bit of that. TeraWulf is the one. Out of all the miners that reported, there were 2 whose stocks performed poorly, one of which was Marathon, and I think that was really because all the stocks performed poorly the day they reported, so I'm not sure that was a correlation. Maybe it was. And the other one was TeraWulf. For whatever reason, the market just did not like their earnings. They reacted very poorly. You can see, this is by far the worst performer on the week. So, do we have TeraWulf? Do we have people in TeraWulf? Is anybody buying the dip in TeraWulf? TeraWulf, they've had a lot of growth. They've got growth plans ahead. I think they're a much better company today than they were a year ago. That's my personal opinion, but I don't own any TeraWulf, and I do think they have issues. So, and I guess the market agrees, because they were the big underperformer this week for whatever reason. And Darren S. is pointing out a good point that everybody should bear in mind. The leverage products have a lot of tracking errors. This is what Darren is saying. If you don't get a decisive strong move, you're not going to get that leverage over time. So you're going to get erosion. The longer this takes, the less of that leverage you're going to get. There's just no doubt about it. And as always, leverage products work both ways, right? If things get worse, you're going to get leveraged worse. And there's the erosion bias to the downside as it is. So, a couple of reasons to be careful. I feel strongly there's going to be a big move up in a few things, so I do some leveraged ETFs. I don't get involved in, one of the I won't say big problems, but one of the frustrations in Bitcoin is there's all these products around the world, and in the US technically, allegedly you're not allowed to use these products, but if you watch most of the YouTubers, they go on and on about there's no KYC, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of these, there are a lot of exchanges out there offering 20x, 50x, 100x leverage on Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. And, these monster amounts of leverage can cause big, short-term swings to the upside or the downside because everybody can see where people have leveraged. So, when there's a bias in one direction or the other, it tends to gravitate towards, liquidating everybody and making everybody lose all their money, which happens, multiple times per week. Pogo, it looks like, is saying yes, and I think he means he or she. No, he is saying Wolf, hope they do what they say they'll do. So it looks like we've got at least one person invested in Wolf. So, and I know there was at one point they were extremely popular. So there must be people left investing in this. So if we just go through, I'll spend a minute just to go. These are not the 10 Qs. These are just the press releases. But I just wanted to highlight a few things. Marathon, net income, $337 million. Now, again, the companies, and they have by far the biggest stack of Bitcoin, by far. So, yes, was all of that the increase in their value of Bitcoin? Yes, it was. And that was true for most of these companies. Most of the Bitcoin miners, on a generally accepted accounting principles, on a GAAP basis in the US, were somewhere in the neighborhood of break even if you don't count the pickup that they got on the increase in, their value of their Bitcoin. But they were, depreciation is a big number in these companies. So, all of these companies, all of the big 8 that I'm talking about, were very cash flow positive in this quarter. So, that's important. And for most of them, by my math, even after the halving, it looks to me like they're going to be cash flow positive. Yeah, it's going to be a lot less cash than it was in the first quarter, and it'll probably turn a lot of them, unless Bitcoin has a big run very quickly, it may turn a lot of them, for GAAP purposes back into having some losses instead of these profits. So the second quarter could be rough from a financial reporting standpoint. But we'll see, and it depends on the price of Bitcoin. Here's the thing, the from a revenue standpoint, the average price of Bitcoin is going to go up quarter over quarter. So, because it was somewhere in the low 50s on the average in Q1, the period ended March 31st, 2024. So it will be higher than that. Obviously, unless Bitcoin crashes right now, it's going to be somewhere in the low 60s, mid 60s, maybe higher for this quarter. So that will jump up. But, half of this quarter was in, more than that. Most of this quarter was post-halving. So, like I said, the next quarterly reports are going to be tough. But for this quarter, you can see Marathon, $337 million of net income. This is Riot. This quarter, Riot reported net income of $211 million. CleanSpark, net income of $126 million. And for a lot of these companies, the other thing, CleanSpark included, they had almost $111.8 million of revenue. That was by far their all-time record. And a lot of the Bitcoin miners had their all-time record revenue in the first quarter. So what I'm going to be looking for me, I think there's going to be a bunch of companies that can have, by the third quarter or certainly the fourth quarter, have more revenue than they did in this first quarter, even though the first quarter was 100% pre-halving. So that's what I'm looking for out of the Bitcoin miners. And I think the ones that do that increase their exahash substantially, at the same time, you're going to see a lot of these companies, their efficiency on a joules per terahash, they're making 30%, 40% improvements in efficiency. That's a big, big deal. So, I think there's good times ahead, but it could be a lot of pain in between now and then, which we've been experiencing. I'm going to go to the year to date because So this is as of last Friday, not today. So this does not include, but we saw almost every single Bitcoin miner was green this week. So for the most part, things got a little bit better than this. But you're going to see CleanSpark up 41%. At this time, Bitcoin was up 44%. It was up 11% from that this week. So, but yet still, other than CleanSpark, every single Bitcoin miner was in the red. And some of these Stronghold, Gree, Argo Blockchain, Moss, and Any, those are the ones that I'm talking about that I don't know what comes of these. The CEO of CleanSpark was a little more definitive about this. He pretty much, without naming names, did say a lot of these Bitcoin mining companies are not going to make it to the end of the year. And, the market seems to be saying that it's going to be, at a minimum these. And even these are big moves down year to date, right? BitDigital's down 49% year to date. I would submit to you, I don't hold BitDigital, but they have a really nice balance sheet. And, they had a good quarter. It's not something I'm going to invest in, but, I don't see a BitDigital or a Hive going out of business. That to me doesn't make any sense. So I think these are big downward moves. These could be opportunities. I don't own either one of these, and I'm not recommending them. I'm just saying, for a company that had a really good Q1, they're down 49% year to date. So if I look at So here's BitDigital. $30 million in revenue. Let's see if I can just find total assets of $291 million. Let me see if I highlighted. I didn't highlight it. But this is a company that, has a lot of assets, almost no liabilities. They have a strong balance sheet. Adjusted EBITDA, $58 million. Now, again, they did get a pickup because they have cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, a lot of Bitcoin, and I think some Ethereum on their balance sheet, which they stake. And I'll tell you, the Ethereum staking was like 1% of their revenue. So I don't get, pardon me if this offends anybody, but here, revenue from Ethereum staking was $0.3 million. So to me, Ethereum is not for these publicly traded companies at this point, in my opinion. But they do have, some high performance computing stuff coming online. $8 million of revenue in their high performance computing. That number should grow and grow. They have a gigantic contract there. So, this is a company that's down 49% this year. Again, I don't own it. I'm not recommending it. I'm just saying, the Bitcoin miners have been beaten soundly. And I'm just, I would ask the question, are these overly beaten down? Barry's saying you're watching the golf, George.
Yeah, watching the golf. I am not watching the golf. I'll play the golf. I won't watch the golf.
You don't watch the golf. No golf.
Don't watch the golf. No way.
So let's talk Bitfarms, because they're the other ones that had some rattling, jarring news in my opinion, but then some good news. So I'm going to go to that, but if I could ask everybody, we got 95 likes. We're going for at least 100 likes. If you guys could help us out, we would appreciate it very much. Let's talk about Bitfarms for a minute. So, and if we looked, we just saw Bitfarms ended up 1% on the week. But I want to show, before I go to these articles, I want to show you the journey that Bitfarms took this week. So this was Friday. So we'll zoom in a little bit. So Friday was a down day. Last Friday was a down day for most of the Bitcoin miners. It was a rough day. But you'll see even from there, Bitfarms was down about 8% on Monday of this week. So rough day on Monday, and here's why. Back on March 25th, Bitfarms announced, and for those of you who are members, we went through a little bit of this, so I'll try and go quickly, but I just want to take people through the journey because this was a curveball, just period. In my opinion, this was not what I expected. On March 25th, so not quite 2 months ago, Bitfarms announces CEO transition. So Geoffrey Morphy, who was their existing president, chairman of the board, or CEO, and on the board of directors, he was going to transition out. He was going to participate in the process of hiring a new CEO and then segue out. So you'll see CEO transition. Fast forward to Monday of this week, Bitfarms announces acceleration of previously announced termination of CEO and provides update on new CEO. So all of a sudden, the very what appeared to be an amicable separation, and it was a bit of a head scratcher even at that, but at least it did seem like, you know, whatever went on, it seemed like they were amicably separating, and, you know, everybody was going to move forward. But then now all of a sudden we get, this was a immediate termination. Geoffrey Morphy has been terminated effective immediately. He will no longer serve as a director of the company. On May 10th, Mr. Morphy filed a statement of claim in the Superior Court of Ontario against the company, claiming damages for breach of contract, wrongful dismissal, and aggressive and punitive damages in the amount of $27 million. So this went from a CEO transition to an immediate termination and a big lawsuit. So I don't worry too much about these lawsuits, and that doesn't mean it's not real. But, you know, these are long journeys, and they usually end up somewhere, you know, nowhere near where they started. So I have no idea how all that will end up. I don't think that that's the main takeaway from here. That's not what's going to impact Bitfarms in the long term. But this was not, you know, investors don't want, you know, abrupt change at upper management, and there's, you know, no more upper management than your CEO. So this was not received well. Bitfarms got beaten down on this, but the next day, so they did have a little good news in their back pocket, so they sandbagged that. The next day they came out with this press release. Bitfarms doubles, I won't even try to pronounce this, capacity to 200 megawatts with an additional 100 megawatts of hydropower in Paraguay. So, you know, this is a continuation of their growth plan. So, you know, this was new. This extra 100 megawatts is scheduled to be deployed in 2025. So one of the questions that I had, the additional 100 megawatts provides a low-cost growth path for the first half of 2025 without impacting our 2024 21 exahash target, which remains, I didn't highlight the rest of this, which remains on schedule. So, you know, they're planning on getting from 7.5 exahash to 21 exahash in 2024, and now they're starting to roll out, here's some more growth that we're looking for in 2025. So this was good news. They then put out their, let's find their, So then fast forward one more day. Oh, the other thing they did on Monday simultaneously is delay their earnings results. So, investors tend to not love that either. It was only really from after hours on Monday to before the market opens on Wednesday. So it's only really one trading day difference. But again, it's just another negative thing. But this came out Wednesday morning. And in my opinion, these were very good numbers. Revenue of $50 million, that was up from the previous quarter, even though they mined a bunch less Bitcoin. The difficulty level got a lot higher, and their growth plans haven't really kicked in yet. They still managed to increase their revenue. They increased their gross profit margin, gross mining margin of 59%, up from 52% in the previous quarter. So they increased revenue, they increased gross profit, and this 59% does not include the fact that, they're going to go from current hash rate of 7 exahash. They're looking to get to 21 exahash by the end of the year. And in that process, so most of their machines will be the latest and greatest 21s, some of the T21s, some of the S21s, which are much, much more efficient. And they're swapping out a bunch of their existing machines. So they're looking to, let's see, 21 watts per terahash, watts, joules. So, that's a dramatic, I think they were at 35 watts per terahash efficiency coming into the year. So they're looking to end the year at 21 watts. That's a massive improvement in efficiency. So, they're going to more than triple in size. If they do this plan, they will more than triple in size. They'll have a dramatic, 30 or 40, here, they say right here, 40% efficiency improvement. So if they have a, 223% hash rate increase, which is more than a triple, 40% improvement in efficiency, this is a company that's fourth quarter should be much better than their first quarter was, and this is a good first quarter. So this is all about execution. As we've been talking about with all these Bitcoin miners, can they do what they're telling us they're going to do? If Bitfarms does what their plan is, if they execute this plan, I think there's great things ahead for them. And operationally speaking, and I know a lot of you have made a lot of comments, and I'm right with you. Ben, who runs their mining operations, I think he's, super high quality. He does an outstanding job. So there's no reason for me to believe they're not going to continue to, perform operationally at a very high level. That's my opinion. So that's what went on with Bitfarms, and you can see from there they recovered. So, Wednesday we saw they were up about 14%. So, and that was on earnings. So while the market hated this, abrupt transition at the CEO, and that was a big pullback, it immediately reversed itself once earnings came out, and, sideways for the rest of the week. I got one story in here specifically for you, George, if I can find it.
Is it about Wisconsin? Was it Wisconsin?
That'll be the next one. We'll do those two in a row. So this was on May 14th. So that was Tuesday. Coinbase resumes operations after 3-hour outage. Some users may still be, and again, this was, May 14th at 1:30 in the morning Eastern time. Some users may still be experiencing a degraded service. So Coinbase had a 3-hour outage.
Amazing.
I find that, I don't know if shocking is the right word, disturbing. There's an awful lot of people that have an awful lot of money on Coinbase. And, for them to not be able to trade for 3 hours, what if that was the wrong 3 hours? Right, it was a pretty uneventful 3 hours as it happened to turn out this time, but this is something, in my opinion, Coinbase should be well beyond the days where their platform doesn't work for 3 hours. What are your thoughts on that, George, being a Coinbase user.
Oh, that's par for the course. I mean, they don't really care. I mean, Coinbase, they just make so much freaking money. Unbelievable. They make it coming and going.
They do. They make money. Their stock's done very well. It's having a little bit of a pullback lately, but their stock has performed very well. Let's just see.
Tom, I'm going to sneak out.
All right, George. Thanks for jumping in and joining us. I know you were.
I had fun.
All right. Have a great weekend.
I'm almost better.
You're on the mend.
Yeah, on the mend.
Well, feel better.
See you guys. See ya. See you, everyone.
Good night, George. All right, we'll switch over. That's it for George. So, I mean, you can see so from their dip in February, this was 144% run to the upside. They're still up, 80% from February, but they're down a bunch from their peak. Well, 25% pullback. That's less than most of the Bitcoin miners in that time frame. So the other article that George was just talking about was there was a big thing that happened this week. In my opinion, this was a big deal. You guys let me know. State of Wisconsin buys nearly $100 million worth of BlackRock spot Bitcoin ETF. So this is the beginning of, this is the tip of the iceberg. This is less than the tip of the iceberg, right? This is $100 million, the state of Wisconsin dipping their toe into the shallow end of, these Bitcoin ETFs. So the amount of money that is in pools like this that has not yet even begun to buy Bitcoin, this is the Bitcoin adoption that, we've been talking about. We've gotten a lot of in a lot of different ways, but these ETFs have opened up potential Bitcoin adoption to places that, have never bought any Bitcoin before, would not otherwise be buying Bitcoin potentially for years, if ever. But these ETFs are opening up these types of doors. So, here you see it's $100 million, but this is somebody had to start. And I don't know if this is the first one, but there's an awful lot of money at the federal, state, local level, across, just the United States, across 50 states. And, so, and this is just one pool of money, right? There's more. Let me see. I've got another article. Here we go. Morgan Stanley is the latest bank to disclose spot ETF holdings for clients. The Wall Street giant held roughly $270 million worth of Grayscale's Bitcoin Trust at the end of March, according to a filing. So I find it interesting. They're the one people on earth that are buying into the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. I'm exaggerating, but obviously all but like 2 or 3 days since these ETFs started, Grayscale has been, massive outflows. But here you've got Morgan Stanley. So just a couple of notes on this. Morgan Stanley held nearly $270 million of the Grayscale GBTC, so the Grayscale ETF. The investments were likely made on behalf of clients and not a bet on the Bitcoin by the bank itself. So there's no way to know that for sure, but that is highly likely that it's their high net worth clients, and in all likelihood is where this starts. Morgan Stanley was the owner of $269.9 million of Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. There was one other sentence I think was in this article, but maybe it was in a different article. Okay, Morgan Stanley opened up the spot ETFs allocations to its clients shortly after their approval in January, though only on an unsolicited basis, meaning that the client had to propose the investment to the broker. So this is not something that they're recommending people start to, allocate a portion of their portfolio to. This is only their existing clients that went to them and said, I want you to add the Bitcoin, spot ETF to my portfolio. So even with just that, this is $270 million. Again, the tip of the iceberg. Morgan Stanley has, I'm sure they have trillions of dollars. Let me see, because that actually leads me to this. Speaking of somebody that has trillions of dollars in the $9 trillion area, this announcement came out. And I think this is going to end up being a big, big deal for Bitcoin. To me, this is a Bitcoin announcement. And I don't think people understand this. I don't think anybody looked at it this way. Vanguard names former BlackRock executive as the CEO. So this was a gigantic, gigantic move. This is the first time Vanguard, which holds $9 trillion of assets under management. They're, I guess, second to BlackRock, but virtually the same. BlackRock, I think, says 10 trillion. Vanguard's 9 trillion. That's trillion. That's not an accident. $9 trillion under management. But look who they got. Vanguard Group tapped a former BlackRock executive, putting an outsider in charge of the asset manager for the first time in its roughly 50-year history. I'm not going to butcher this person's name. So at BlackRock, they led the ETF and index investing. So remember, that means this is the person that proposed and got the BlackRock Bitcoin ETF. That individual in charge of ETFs at BlackRock is now the CEO of Vanguard. Vanguard, who forbids their clients to even buy the ETFs, the Bitcoin ETFs. So I don't think it's a big leap to make that you're going to see a fundamental shift in this $9 trillion under management that's a lot more favorable towards Bitcoin. So I think this is a huge, huge announcement. And it's not, these are one of these things. This is not overnight. It's not like, okay, now, by next Friday, billions of dollars are going to move into Bitcoin at Vanguard. But I think this seems highly likely that Vanguard's going to have a fundamental shift in their attitude towards Bitcoin. And, that will lead to ultimately, slowly over time, some reasonable portion of their $9 trillion heading, into Bitcoin, even if it's, 1%. That's a game changer. So that's some more adoption. So these are, these stories come out every single week. We just keep getting more and more and more Bitcoin adoption. So I want to go through just a little bit of super basic technical charting. First, let's go back to the Bitcoin 15 minutes. So we're kind of sideways since the market closed. Somewhere just under 67,000. So I want to show you a couple of reasons why I think we have quadruple confirmed a breakout to the upside for Bitcoin. So this is not it, but while we're here, let's talk about this. And then what happened to that? Okay. Must be over here. Okay. So, all right. So switching gears for a second. This was yesterday. So the ETFs yesterday, $257 million of inflows from the ETFs, and notably BlackRock, which had been doing zero for days and days and days, had $94 million of inflow. Grayscale was positive. So, you can see the average flow for Grayscale since the day these ETFs started is $200 million of outflow per day. So, $5 million of inflow is a big deal because, it's only $5 million, but it's instead of $200 million going out. So yesterday, day 88 of the ETFs, $257 million of inflow. The day before, $303 million of inflow. this is a return to what was going on. So we had a period of time where all of a sudden we were going sideways. There was outflows. You can see yesterday BlackRock continued having zero. So that 94 million was a big step in the right direction. But look at Fidelity yesterday, $132 million. Bitwise, $86 million of inflow. Grayscale, $27 million of inflow. So several days in a row in the green for Grayscale. I don't know. I still am skeptical. I think there's more outflow to go with Grayscale, but this is a nice trend. And you can see this is Wednesday and Thursday, and that's when we had our breakout for Bitcoin. So this correlation is still very strong. And as we had outflows from these ETFs is when we had that pullback from our high of nearly 74,000. So if I just look at some simple charts, I just kind of saved these the day of the breakout. This was Wednesday. So we had, for a period of time, this descending line of resistance. So you can see, we touched this on Monday. We touched this on Tuesday and got rejected. On Wednesday, once we went through this, as is so often the case, once we break through one of these lines, it's off to the races. And we closed this daily candle miles away from this line. So that was one. Two, we've been in a trend of lower highs. So that is obviously a bearish trend. Lower high, lower high. Well, with Wednesday, you can see we broke out of that. We finished well above this. And now you're going to see today, we're testing this. So, we have a higher high now and potentially even past this high. So, and that's just in a couple of days. And we'll get, this was, so thirdly, with our lower highs, we were also having lower lows. So that trend reversed. So lastly, on the daily RSI, which I've always said good things happen for Bitcoin over 50 on the daily RSI. So we had been bouncing around. 50 had turned into, you can see, resistance here. And again, dating back even further, lower high, lower high, lower high, lower high. While simultaneously, we finally broke above 50 on the daily RSI and have a much higher high here. So, you put all these things together, and, this is, every way that you look at this, it screams breakout to the upside. So if I go to the actual, right, so since then, I made these charts Wednesday night after this daily candle closed. So we pulled back a little on Thursday, and now a green candle, we're even higher. So you can see we're now challenging this. So it's no surprise. We got a little bit of resistance right here. But I believe, I think we're on a run back to our all-time high. So, and my price target, I think there's some pretty decent resistance at around, 71 or 72,000. So I expect to bump, maybe have a little bit of a hard time bumping through that. But then, next is our previous all-time high, just under 74,000, and then potentially up from there. So I don't want to get ahead of myself. We don't know how long this run is, but I do think we've clearly turned out of this, short-term, I'll call it short-term bearish trend. Although it was a couple of months, we've changed momentum. We've changed direction. And to me, this was crystal clear. And then if you look at it, here we stay on the daily RSI. We're well above 50, and this is where, what we hope happens is we start to get, once we broke above 50 here, we retested it a little bit, and then, from there to there was a gigantic, it was a $20,000 move in Bitcoin from here to here. So this is what I'm saying. Over 50 on the daily RSI, this is when we get these gigantic moves up. So it took all the way, 2.5 months of resetting this, but you can see we got down to 34, and now we're back on the move. So I think it's back on. always be careful. Again, that doesn't mean I think that it's in a straight line from here, just straight up, and it's all blue sky ahead. Just yesterday we had a pullback. We'll have some retests. You'll also see for the first time since, this was at the beginning of the last time we had any momentum on the histogram on the MACD was at the beginning of March, 2.5 months ago. So now all of a sudden we've got 3 dark green candles and we're starting to see, so that's another, we have multiple confirmations. So while nothing is guaranteed, right? I don't care how many technical things in a row say that, Bitcoin or anything is going to go do something. Nothing is for certain. But there's multiple confirmations that, the bias right now for sure is to the upside. So we'll see if and when and how long it takes that to play out. But, I think we're headed back to 71,000, 74,000. So let's just do one more. Give me just 1 second. I'm typing. So I'm just going to do a yes or no. And I shouldn't have said can. I'm going to change that to will Bitcoin hit $80,000 by July 31st? So that's, that's more than 2 months from now, 2.5 months from now. So will Bitcoin, so not can it. Of course it can, anything can happen. Will Bitcoin hit $80,000 by July 31st? So for me, I think we will. Again, I feel like there's going to be a couple of times we're at one right now. You can see, all these yellow lines here are probably going to be some amount of resistance. Some of these we may blow through because once momentum gets going, you see how Bitcoin moves. So, we may run right through these, or we may hit resistance. We may retest. Those are more common things to happen, right? Usually we do not get things just straight up in a straight line. That's not how this normally works. But you can see, right? I mean, we had a huge move up here, and then, some consolidation. Then we had a huge move up here, and then all of this consolidation. So to me, the longer these periods of consolidation, the more potential there is for a big move to the upside. So there may be some of you that think we're going to go a lot higher than 80,000. Now, July 31st is only 2.5 months from now. I would be happy with, so somewhere this summer, in other words, I'd like to see Bitcoin hit $80,000. And for me, that's nowhere near the price target that I have for this bull market, which, could last anywhere from 9 to 15 more months from now, or who knows, right? Everybody has a different opinion on that. I think we're going to get somewhere between $150,000 and $200,000 before it's said and done with. That is just my opinion. Please do not take that as financial advice. We all have our own opinion. That's what I think. That's where I think Bitcoin's going before this run is over. Kay is asking, Tom, are you lightening up your Bitfarms position and moving some money to other miners? So thanks for the question, Kay. No, I have not. I'm not. But I will say I stopped adding. I'm not going to add to my Bitfarms position. There's no, and I shouldn't say no and never, but there's really almost no pullback that Bitfarms could have for me that would represent a buying opportunity. It's already completely a full position for me, in my opinion. But I think it's nowhere near, where it's going. I think we're just, for Bitfarms, I think it's just getting, into the part where we're going to start to see that execution. We're going to start to see, can they get, they said by June 30th they'd be at 12 exahash. So, I'm not going to, nothing's written in stone, but if it's somewhere in that neighborhood there or shortly thereafter, if they hit that target, that represents a big move on their part. And that will give me confidence that they're going to be, on target to get to 21 exahash by the end of the year. So I think most of the good part for Bitfarms is ahead. So while I will not buy anymore, Iris Energy is the only one of my positions that I would even consider buying. And I have to tell you, I did not buy this dip. So if ever I was going to buy, I feel like, that a couple of nights ago when Crypto Fever jumped in at $4.57, that was the time, and I didn't do it. So probably that tells me that even that position, which is smaller than my other ones, I just have so much Bitcoin-related stuff in my portfolio. I just don't see myself adding anymore. I may play some options on a small scale. So I do that on a much smaller scale than the positions that I buy and hold for the long term. Someone's asking, what about Hive? So I like Hive, and I don't own any Hive. So I'll tell you, I don't own any Hive, but I do think they have managed to put a plan together to basically swap out the majority of their fleet and at the same time increase their exahash. Now, they're in that, the reason that I put them in that group between 8 and 12 out of the Bitcoin miners, they're looking to get to 8 exahash. So, that's why, to me, I consider for the time being, I consider their peers to be like companies like BitDigital and Hut and BitDeer. So those three and Hive I put in a group. And that doesn't mean all those companies are the same, right? There's lots of differences between those 4 companies, but that's that group that, for me, I put them in that group. But I like what they're doing. They're increasing their exahash rate, although to me 20 is kind of the new benchmark. So there's 6 companies that have a clear path to 20 exahash by the end of the year. There's 2 more, which is Cypher and TeraWolf, that I think will get there sometime in the first half of 2025. So that's that 8 that I have in mind. And then, then all of a sudden, so when you look at Hive, they're looking to get to 8 exahash. That's much less than half the next, that group of 8 that's above them. So I don't know. If they execute properly, they're going to increase their efficiency quite a bit. They've swapped out the majority of their fleet. So, and here's the other thing. Let me see if I can find this chart. I don't know why these are taking a second to load. So on April 16th, it was my opinion that I thought all the Bitcoin miners hit their local low. There was a bottoming out process. I thought that was the bottom. I kind of called April 16th as the bottom. So this chart is a week old. So, this information is a week old. I will update and do my update over the weekend. But you'll see, other than, Argo Blockchain is a nano cap stock, micro cap stock. Any is a nano cap stock. So I've really, for me, I've kind of stopped paying attention to these. These are 2 that are in that group that are down 60+% year to date, 98 or 99% off of their all-time highs. But the one stock you'll see that isn't holding, other than that, the one stock that didn't hold this April 16th low that I thought was going to be a good bottom. And you can see for most of the rest of these, they're well off of that. So this bottom did hold so far. Obviously, it's not over. But I do think this is holding up very well. Hive has been moving in the wrong direction. So I would ask myself, and I'm not saying it is, but because I think Hive's doing, a good job, the fact that their stock is underperforming could potentially represent a buying opportunity. So again, this is the stuff you guys got to decide. I try to provide these charts to show information like, hey, Hive's underperforming its peers here. For the last 3.5 weeks as of last Friday, Hive was underperforming all of its peers except one. So is their company doing that? I don't think so. So I think their stock, is unjustly getting beaten up here, in my opinion. So, like I said, for me, all my positions are so full, I just don't have room for the next thing. But I think this is interesting, in my opinion. So somebody's asking what's HUT 8's exahash. HUT 8's exahash has actually been pulling back, but they did talk on their earnings call and in their press release. They talked about, they've taken all of their outdated machines offline, right? They focused on efficiency. And again, I'm going to do a deep dive on this, so I don't want to get too far into it. But yes, they took some of their facilities offline altogether. They took a lot of their machines that are outdated, they unplugged. So, whereas almost all of their peers are increasing their exahash as time goes by, they've actually decreased their exahash quite a bit so far in the year 2024. I think it was 4.5. Let me see if I can. So they're saying 5.5 exahash as of March 31st. I think it might have gone down to 4.5 as of April 30th, but somebody can double check me. I'm not positive. That's just from my memory. So, my memory may be failing me. But I do think it went down again even after this. But at a minimum, it was down to 5.5 exahash from, I think, 7.2 or 7.4 coming into the beginning of the year. So Robin said, HUT, in less than 2 quarters, added $12 million to stock-based comp. Yeah, and Robin said, wasn't the US BTC merger enough for them? So I hear you, Robin. I don't want to get too deep into this, but yeah, there was not a lot of growth in HUT. In fact, we saw that, their Bitcoin mining shrank. Now, they did say they intend to grow their Bitcoin mining, but, at the moment, the opposite is happening. So we'll see. They have not announced any purchases of machines yet. They've announced their intention to continue to increase their exahash. So I'll dig into that more, but no specific purchase orders. Unlike really all the other companies we've talked about, Marathon. So if I go down the list, Marathon, Riot, CleanSpark, Bitfarms, Cypher, TerraWolf, Iris Energy, BitDeer, and Hive all have put out very specific growth plans. Some of their growth plans are a lot larger than others, but those companies have all put out very specific growth plans. BitDigital has put out a generic growth plan, basically saying they intend to grow. HUT 8 similarly has put out a statement that they intend to grow, but that's different than here's a purchase order, here's what we bought, here's how many we bought, and here's how much exahash it's going to add. So we're still waiting on those companies for more specifics. The other thing worth noting is Marathon has added a lot of exahash. They plan to get to 50 exahash by the end of 2024. So, they continue from a size standpoint to be the largest, and their plans, if they execute on their plans. But the one thing that did frustrate me a little is they just will not disclose the machines that they're buying, these Auradine machines, that they have a relationship with that company. And I guess they're trying to, they may have, reasons they want to keep the specifications on these machines confidential, but they were asked in the question and answering, they were asked, how do these machines compare to the S21s, the other competitors? And they won't answer. They're not giving out the specifications on these machines. They just won't do it. They're not telling us how many they bought. They're not. We don't know. But what we do know is they are adding significant exahash. They have already added a lot of exahash this year, and they plan to get from just under 30 where they are right now to 50 by the end of the year. So Marathon has big growth plans between now and the end of the year. I'm just taking a look. I think I pretty much got through everything that I was going to talk about. So, and it's just almost exactly that time. So I'm going to wrap it up. I want to thank everybody for joining on the live stream. Let's get the results of this poll. Can Bitcoin hit 80,000 by July? 82% say yes. 18% say no. So feels like overwhelming optimism that we can get to 80,000 in what I'll call the short term, in the next couple of months. So, and I would be a yes on that. Again, obviously, that's only all of our opinions. We'll see what happens. But I feel like, you know, we've had a technical breakout, and unless some other thing happens to reverse that, I think the bias is to the upside right now. So I'm hoping that plays out. And I'm hoping, you know, couple of spots along the way, 67,000, 72,000, 74,000, and then hopefully to 80,000. So we'll see. So thanks again, everybody. I know this afternoon for the Bitcoin miners was not, you know, we were kind of moved down all afternoon. But Bitcoin continues to run. And like I said, in my opinion, we've had a pretty clear breakout. So we'll see where we go from here. Thank you all so much. Have a fantastic weekend. And as always, I'll put out my weekend update with, you know, all the information from what happened this week. So thanks again and have a great weekend.